You know what's wild? In just 48 hours, one speech completely flipped the entire global power game upside down. Not a war, not a nuclear threat, just words. Now Trump is threatening to slap a 100% tariff on everything coming from Canada. But here's the thing most people are missing: this isn't about trade. This isn't even about China. This is about something way more dangerous. So let me break this down for you, because what happened in Davos on January 20th wasn't just another political speech, it was a rupture. And what followed wasn't just a tariff threat, it was retaliation. Picture this: World Economic Forum, Davos, Switzerland. You know, that place where billionaires gather to talk about making the world better while sipping champagne. But this time, something different went down. Mark Carney, Canada's Prime Minister, stands up and says, "We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition, not a shift, not an evolution. A rupture." He didn't mention Trump by name, didn't have to. He talked about great powers using economic integration as weapons, tariffs as leverage, financial systems as coercion. Everyone in that room knew exactly who he was talking about. But here's where it gets really interesting. Carney didn't just criticize, he issued a call to action. He said, middle powers must act together, because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. Think about that phrase. On the menu, not left behind, not disadvantaged. On the menu, as in you will be consumed. Your sovereignty, your economy, your identity, all of it becomes food for the powerful. And when he finished speaking, something unusual happened. He got a standing ovation. At Davos, where standing ovations are rare, the reaction was immediate. Finland's president called it one of the best speeches heard at Davos that week. Former Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull said the message was clear: we will not be bullied. We will maintain our sovereignty. Leaders from Estonia to Sweden praised it. Why? Because Carney said out loud what dozens of countries have been thinking in private: the old world order is dead. Now here's where Carney got really clever. He referenced Václav Havel, the Czech dissident who became president. He quoted Havel's 1978 essay about a greengrocer who puts up a sign saying, "Workers of the world, unite," not because he believes it, but because everyone expects it, because it's easier to conform than resist. Havel's point: the moment one person stops performing, the moment the greengrocer takes down the sign, the entire illusion begins to collapse. Carney told the room, "Friends, it is time for companies and countries to take their signs down." What sign? The sign that says the rules-based international order still works. The sign that says, America will always protect its allies. Carney stated it bluntly: we knew the story was partially false, that the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient. Everyone knew. But everyone kept performing, until Carney decided to take the sign down. And this is what terrified Washington. Not the criticism, but the permission structure. Carney wasn't just speaking for Canada. He was giving every middle power in the world permission to stop pretending. As one observer noted, yesterday it was impossible to walk in Davos without people wanting to talk about Trump. Today it's Mark Carney they want to talk about. So naturally Trump had to respond. But his response revealed something unexpected. This wasn't really about China at all. Earlier in January, Carney visited China and reached an agreement. Up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles could enter Canada at a lower tariff rate, while China would drop tariffs on Canadian canola seed and remove anti-discrimination tariffs on Canadian lobster, crab, and peas. Pretty standard trade deal, right? But here's where it gets weird. Initially, Trump appeared to approve the Canada-China trade deal, calling it good thing. Days later, complete reversal. Trump threatened, if Canada makes a deal with China, it will immediately be hit with a 100% tariff. What changed? The Davos speech. Look at the timeline: January 14th to 17th, Carney and China makes the deal. Trump approves. January 20th, Carney gives the Davos speech. January 21st, Trump responds. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark. January 24th, Trump threatens 100% tariffs. This isn't about electric vehicles. The tariff threat was never about protecting American markets. It was about reasserting dominance, making an example. Carney stood up and essentially said, we don't have to accept subordination anymore. Trump's response was to show him, and every other middle power watching, what happens when you step out of line. The China deal was just the excuse, but there's something else Trump keeps doing that reveals his deeper intentions. In his Truth Social post, Trump referred to Mark Carney as Governor Carney instead of Prime Minister. A typo. Think again. This isn't the first time. Trump previously used the same term for Trudeau, echoing comments about annexing Canada as America's 51st state. Think about what this does. When you refuse to use someone's official title, you're not just being disrespectful. You're denying their legitimacy. You're saying, I don't recognize your authority. I don't acknowledge your sovereignty. Governor implies subordination. A governor reports to someone higher. A governor doesn't have full autonomy. Most people laughed off Trump's comments about Canada becoming the 51st state. Campaign rhetoric, Trump being Trump. But look at his actions, refusing to use official titles, threatening economic destruction, asserting the right to approve or veto Canada's trade deals. These aren't jokes. These are boundary tests. And here's what's truly revealing. Trump said, Canada lives because of the United States, not benefits from trade, not an important ally. Lives because. That's not ally language. That's colonial language. Language of ownership, subordination, a relationship where one party exists only at the pleasure of the other. This is exactly what Carney warned about in Davos. He said, when you only negotiate bilaterally with a hegemon, you negotiate from weakness. You accept what is offered. This is not sovereignty. It is the performance of sovereignty while accepting subordination. Trump is trying to make Canada perform sovereignty while accepting subordination, and Carney just publicly refused. But here's what makes this moment dangerous and important. Carney isn't acting alone. In his Davos speech, Carney specifically called for middle powers to work together. This wasn't aspirational, it was strategic. Finland's president praised it. Sweden's former foreign minister called it very important. Estonia's Foreign Relations Committee chair called it a genuine manifesto of free people standing up to bullies. These are Nordic and Baltic states, countries that know what it's like to live next to an aggressive great power. Carney laid out the strategy: when we only negotiate bilaterally with a hegemon, we negotiate from weakness. But when we act together, we can create a third path with impact. Think about what this means. If Canada alone resists Trump's tariff threats, they get crushed. But if Canada, the EU, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and dozens of other middle powers coordinate their response, suddenly the math changes. French President Macron used his Davos speech to denounce Trump's threat, describing the endless accumulation of new tariffs as fundamentally unacceptable. This is coalition building in real time. And it's exactly what Trump fears most. Not individual resistance, but coordinated resistance. Because here's the dirty secret: hegemonic power only works if everyone accepts it. The moment multiple countries simultaneously reject the rules, the hegemon can't punish them all without destroying its own economy. Trump knows this. That's why the response wasn't just angry, it was immediate and escalatory. Because if this catches on, if middle powers actually start coordinating their policies independent of American approval, the entire architecture of American power shifts. Which brings us to the real question. Is this actually about trade at all? 100% tariff would devastate both economies. Trump knows this, Carney knows this, so why threaten it? The effective tariff rate on Canadian goods was 0.1% before Trump's administration. It now stands at 3.9%. That's already math percent. That's not trade policy, that's economic warfare. Think about what 100% tariff means. Every Canadian product entering the US doubles in price overnight. Lumber for American homes doubled. Energy resources doubled. Auto parts crossing the border multiple times. Each crossing doubles the cost. This would crater the Canadian economy, but it would also devastate American industries. Construction grinds to a halt. Supply chains collapse. Energy costs spike. Trump himself wrote China will eat Canada alive, completely devour it, including the destruction of their businesses, social fabric, and general way of life. Notice the language. Not harm Canadian trade. Devour their social fabric, their way of life. This isn't economics, this is existential threat messaging. Here's what's really happening. Trump is using economic tools to achieve political goals. The tariff threat is designed to force Canada into a choice: abandon any pretense of independent foreign policy or face economic annihilation. It's not about the China deal. It's about whether Canada, and by extension every middle power, has the right to make decisions without American approval. In the 21st century, you don't need to invade a country to control it. You just need to make them economically dependent enough that the threat of withdrawal is existential. For decades, leaders of middle powers told themselves economic integration with larger powers is good. It creates prosperity, it ensures peace. And it did, as long as larger powers played by agreed rules. But what happens when the larger power decides rules don't apply to them anymore? What happens when integration becomes not mutual benefit, but a vulnerability to be exploited? You get a 100% tariff threat over a routine trade deal. So where does this leave us? Carney's most memorable line: if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. But what does that actually mean? Let me paint you two futures. Future one: Canada backs down, apologizes, cancels the China deal. Trump declares victory. Everything goes back to normal. Except it doesn't. Because every other middle power just watched. They saw that asserting independence gets you threatened. So they don't try, they fall in line. Future 2. Canada holds firm, takes the economic hit if necessary, but doesn't do it alone. As Carney proposed, we are pursuing variable geometry, different coalitions for different issues based on common values and interests. Other middle powers watch. They see that resistance is possible. That coordination is possible. Right now, we're watching this play out in real time. Carney said a country that cannot feed itself, fuel itself, or defend itself has few options. When the rules no longer protect you, you must protect yourself. But he also said, let us be clear-eyed about where this leads. A world of fortresses will be poorer, more fragile, and less sustainable. This moment matters because it's clarifying. For years, middle powers could pretend they had real autonomy while quietly accepting American dominance. Trump is forcing the question. Are you sovereign or not? Can you make independent decisions or not? Will you coordinate with other middle powers or compete with them for favor? Carney's answer is clear. The powerful have their power. But we have something too, the capacity to stop pretending, to name reality, to build our strength, and to act together. The 100% tariff threat is a test, not just for Canada, but for every middle power. Not just about trade, but about whether a different kind of international order is possible. And regardless of what happens next, the question has been asked. The greengrocer has taken down the sign. As Carney said, when even one person stops performing, the illusion begins to crack. The illusion is cracking. So here's what you need to understand. This isn't really about Canada and America. It's about what kind of world we're going to live in. Will it be a world where might makes right, where economic integration is weaponized? Or will it be a world where middle powers coordinate, create alternative structures, build coalitions based on shared interests? Watch who sides with Canada. Watch who stays silent. Watch who tries to curry favor with Washington. Because Carney was right. When you're not at the table, you're on the menu. The question every middle power now faces: do we fight for a seat, or do we accept being served up? What's happening isn't an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a larger transformation. As Carney said, we are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. The world from 1945 to 2025, the world of American hegemony and rules-based institutions, that world is over. The question isn't whether we can go back. We can't. The question is what comes next. Will we get a world of competing fortresses, a new hegemony, or something different where middle powers genuinely coordinate, where shared interests create new alliances, where power is more distributed? Nobody knows. This is being written in real time. But the moment someone stops performing, the illusion begins to crack. Carney stopped performing. The illusion that everything is fine, that the old order still works, that smaller nations can prosper by staying quiet. That illusion is cracking. And once it cracks, you can't put it back together. The real test isn't whether Trump follows through on the tariff. The real test is whether other nations follow Carney's example, whether they build those coalitions, whether they take down their own signs and stop pretending. Because if they do, we're not just watching a trade dispute. We're watching the birth of a genuinely different world order. The real test isn't whether Trump follows through on the tariff. The real test is whether other nations follow Carney's example, whether they build those coalitions, whether they take down their own signs and stop pretending. Because if they do, we're not just watching a trade dispute. We're watching the birth of a genuinely different world order. And maybe that's the most unbelievable cause of all here. Not that Trump imposed a tariff threat, not that Carney gave a speech, but that we might actually be witnessing the moment when the world's middle powers stopped accepting subordination. Thanks for sticking with me through this one here. Drop your thoughts below. I genuinely want to hear your perspective.